Chelsea Maass writes fiction. Her work has been published at Hoot Literary Review and Shotgun Honey. She teaches writing in the undergraduate department at Rosemont College and lives in Philadelphia with her family. Please welcome Chelsea Covington Maass.
All right, so I just decided to read from the very opening of my novel, Chapter 1, Friday, October 25th, 1996. Well beyond midnight, Rex Travers awoke in a ditch. He lay stunned and confused, staring up at bright stars. At first, he mistook the rhythmic whir of crickets for the beating of his own heart. Their night song thrummed in tune with his breathing so that his chest rose and fell with each whining drone. After some time, he managed to separate which sensations belonged to him and which were the property of the night. His arms were almost numb, pinned beneath his back. He rolled onto his side and tried to pull them free. Metal dug in at each wrist and wouldn't let go, clasping them in a familiar fashion. Handcuffs. Rex inched onto his knees, then used a clump of brush against the slope as a foothold to help him stand. Coarse weeds scratched his bare shins. He climbed onto the road and stumbled forward. Overhead, the full moon shone down like an old friend in a strange world. A steaming Lytle County cruiser was just down the road, smashed all the hell against a cottonwood tree. Rex limped over to check on the driver. The engine whined high while thick white smoke poured from the crumpled hood. The front end of the car looked like it could have been compacted by a junkyard crusher. No chance the cop could have survived. Rex crossed back to the ditch and threw up. The sound of his choking echoed along the quiet country road. From far away, a cow lowed in response. Rex fell to his knees at the ghost-like sound of the disembodied animal moan. The smell of digested whiskey arising from the steam of his vomit combined with the sour bile gathering in his throat and made him gag and throw up again until he was dry. Sweat slicked his forehead, rolled into his eyes. He saw a clean patch of grass nearby and leaned into it face first, trying to wipe the sick off his chin and lips. He needed water, something to rinse away the bitter taste. Shaking, he struggled to stand again. This time, he let himself tumble to the bottom of the narrow trench, then positioned his back against the wall of dirt and pushed with both legs. Once on the road, he looked at the place where he'd first awoke, then back toward the wrecked car with its rear passenger door flung open. Rex realized he must have bailed out before impact. Judging from his distance to the cruiser, it had been just in time. One shoulder throbbed with dull pain. He couldn't see all the damage, but it was raw enough that he suspected he'd landed on his right side. With his arms useless behind his back, he'd been lucky the injuries weren't more severe. His tempo beat a quick rhythm. Rex wondered how bad his face looked. How in the hell had he come to be in police custody on this dirt road? Last thing he remembered, he'd been with Lenore at her house. They drank whiskey, watched a couple of scary movies, then passed out on the couch together. Now he was alone. Even the crickets had gone quiet. A dead cop in the middle of the night. Someone would pay for that, and that somebody would likely be Rex. Wouldn't the law be glad to finally pin something big on him, get him carted off to jail and out of their jurisdiction? They'd been hounding him all his life. He supposed this was the big finale. Rex wore nothing but the shorts he'd dressed in before bed. He scanned the ground for a pair of shoes. Finding none, he began to walk. He was no tenderfoot, but even his calloused feet couldn't tough the gravel for more than a few steps. So he moved... Yikes, I missed something there. Sorry. At least no one happening down the road would notice him in the low brush. Rex told himself to keep moving one foot in front of the other, and to thank that moon for lighting his path, for keeping his feet clear of all them gray branches jut out like dead snakes twined through the weeds. The unseasonably warm night failed to rein the chills that rippled in his chest. His teeth chattered so loud that he worried he might not hear the approach of a car if one appeared. Rex tried to calm his shocked body. He stopped walking, closed his eyes, pictured Lenore. He saw her as he last remembered her, stretched warm and lean against his frame on her living room couch, light hair loose around her face. He'd kissed the tip of her nose before fading off himself. He started again, moving at a steady pace through the dry weeds. Soon he heard something scratching in the brush. Rex crouched low, listening. The wind kicked up, and corn stalks swayed like ghostly trees in a haunted forest. It seemed whatever had made the noise was also waiting. Rex sensed its silent breathing in the dark. He scanned the field, the road, and the ditch as best he could without moving his head. Rex held his breath and waited for something to happen. He heard it again, a light scraping on rough bark. Finally, the sound gave way to a muffled crunch of dirt. Something moved toward him from the ditch on the other side of the road. His lungs burned, but he needed to hold the air until he saw just what kind of monster he'd be facing. Rex wasn't sure what it was he thought he might see. Maybe the spirit of his dad, come to whip him for getting into trouble again, or maybe the new Lytle County Sheriff sneaking up to drag him to jail. But when that buck stepped out into clear view on the road, he was shocked. It was the largest he'd ever seen. Granted, he wasn't big into hunting, but this creature was surely in prize territory. Its chest was as broad as a cottonwood trunk. Rex's lungs couldn't hold any longer, and the animal heard his rushed exhalation. The buck turned his majestic head. Moonlight flashed across the large black eyes before its vision locked onto Rex. They stared at one another for an instant that felt to Rex like a lifetime. He felt a jolt move through him, a message from the universe containing all he'd ever sought to understand. Rex sensed that the buck felt like he did sometimes, powerful and sure the world was turning just for him. Maybe that buck had once found a clear stream bubbling along the path just when he was thirsty enough to collapse, and it made sense that the water would be there, waiting. Rex was sure the animal held the same knowledge that he possessed, that the day he closed his eyes for good, the whole of creation would cease to exist. Quick as that animal connection was made, something snapped overhead and the deer bolted out of sight. Rex remained squatting for a bit, listening and waiting. The noise that had frightened the creature away returned, and he realized the clacking came from the bare branches of a nearby tree, swaying in the breeze until the wood creaked like the floorboards of a rundown house. A gust sent showers of dry leaves fluttering into Rex's ditch, and a burst of adrenaline kicked through his veins. He stood and forced himself to continue, knowing that he might walk all night and never end up anywhere familiar. It seemed impossible that any old comfort could appear in the strange world of this night. The cricket choir picked up again. Rex wondered how such a large congregation managed to remain hidden. There had to be thousands of them to make that powerful noise. Were they down in the low scrub with him, in the trees, or maybe further out in the field, feasting on corn husks? He half expected to see a swarm of shiny black insect bodies emerging from the weeds. Odd how a sound that had calmed him through open windows so many summer nights, now distracted his thoughts, spurred him into a zone of fear. He wasn't afraid of crickets, but like the cow's distant cry on the wind, not being able to see the thing that produced the call worked to unnerve every cell in his body. Rex focused on the tree line and tried to figure his location. Familiar as he was with these back roads, he couldn't guess. Not near the river, that much he knew. After all the recent rain, on a quiet night like this, he'd be able to hear the sound of rushing water. His head still felt fuzzy, whether from the booze or the crash or both, he didn't know. The cornfield along the dirt road stretched long and clean, only separated in the distance by another straight line of trees. It was just like any other field in Kansas might look at night. No landmarks to click his memory to a specific place. The corn grew tall, lined in perfect rows, a late harvest this year. A gust of wind combed through the stalks, moving them in unison, and Rex shook his head. The sight had a hypnotizing effect that made him feel blurry when he needed to be alert. Damn it, son. You never paid attention, did you? If you would have listened to me all those years, even in your half-assed way of listening, you might know a little more about your own whereabouts by now. How many times did I explain about that river? It ain't no creek, though it looks it in some parts. The Arkansas is a tributary to the mighty Mississippi. And what that means, since it feeds right into that churning vehicle of the South, is that this here river is really the Mississippi of the North. I know Kansas ain't in the North, but it ain't the South either. We're in no man's land, son. And you got to listen. That river flows in your veins, and you don't know this land like the back of your hand? I should have expected as much from a boy like you. Look around. You see the regular landscape, them old trees lined up along the ditch on both sides, the patterned cornfields out yonder. What else? Hard to see in the dark, ain't it? Look up, boy. No clouds tonight, that's good. Remember what I told you about getting lost? Any dummy can remember the North Star. Find the Big Dipper. Now, I know you can do that. A boy of 3 or 4 can find the Big Dipper. Then use the Dipper bowl to see the pointer stars. They'll lead you to the North Star. His dad was trying to tell him something useful. Rex wanted to hear his voice just in case it might help this time. Still, the old man had to get that nudge in there, remind his son what a piece of crap he was, what a disappointment. That didn't surprise Rex one bit. Why should he be any different dead than he was alive?